Over here, I'm walking through a fairly typical West Texas desert. But right over there, just a few miles away, my route will take me into the Chizos Mountains, which top out at about 8,000 feet. It's one of the classic Big Bend hikes. And while the varied terrain makes for some interesting desert hiking, a desert's a desert, and that means dry. In fact, the only way you hike a place like this is to know how to handle your water supply. Hi, I'm John Viehman. Join me desert hiking in Big Bend National Park as we make our own adventure on Trailside. There's an Indian legend that says when the Creator made the world, he dumped all the excess rubble here in this corner of the Chihuahuan Desert. And it certainly looks that way. Well, the Big Bend area is sometimes referred to as a land of extremes, with elevations ranging from 1,800 feet here on the desert floor and rising suddenly to almost 8,000 feet at Emery Peak in the Chizos Mountains. Well, it's called Big Bend because this is where the Rio Grande abruptly changes its course as it passes through the mountains and canyons that straddle the U.S. and Mexican border. I'll be hooking up with Rawls Williams, a desert and river guide who's been backpacking in this area for almost 20 years. He's also a firefighter and supervises the Diablos, Big Bend's international firefighting team.
Actually, I think I describe myself more as a suburban refugee who prefers cactus to lawns and stars for a ceiling. And you know, I really don't mind rattlesnakes as neighbors.
Hey, Rawls, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good job introducing yourself. Is that the water?
Yep, got plenty of it.
Well, you can never get too much of that out here in the desert.
Yeah, it only seems like it when you're carrying it on your back. Desert hiking's all about water management.
You mean you can only hike as far as your water will take you?
That's correct. Caching your water at the midpoint of your hike's a good technique for desert backpacking.
Mm-hmm. How much water do you need? What is it, like a gallon of water per person per day?
That's about right. You don't want to carry more than 2 gallons of water, which weighs about 16 pounds. And that's about a couple of days worth.
So even if you've got like a water source marked on a map, say a spring, you don't want to even count on that being there?
You shouldn't. Desert springs are mostly ephemeral. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And I can almost always find water in certain locations, certain times of the year, but a person with less knowledge of the area, you never know.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is you want to carry your water with you, huh?
That's about it.
You want me to carry that for a while?
Gladly.
Yeah, I know you've picked the perfect spot to stash this water, but how far in is it?
Well, we don't want to cache it too near the trailhead, especially one with a lot of visitors, but down here near the ranch house is a real good spot.
Of course, you don't want to carry 20 pounds of water any further than you have to either, huh?
That's true. Why don't we cache our water up here near this sign?
Okay. I guess it's pretty important that you have a distinctive marker to go by out here, huh?
Yeah, but I don't like to cache it out in the open like this. I prefer to pace off a few steps from the trail. But you know, I think that over here by that yucca, that ought to work just fine. There's not another one around.
Okay. Just tuck it underneath at the bottom?
Yeah, they're on the backsides just fine. You'll notice how I've got that labeled, huh?
Yeah, how come you did that?
Well, I like to mark my water caches. That way if somebody stumbles across it, they'll know it's current and we're depending on it.
So we're supposed to reach this at the end of the second day?
Oh, that shouldn't be a problem at all, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm still having trouble figuring out where we are, so you want to show me on the map?
Sure. All right, so we just cached our water down here near the Dotson trailhead. And what we'll do is we'll leave a vehicle here. And we'll drive up and around and into the basin.
Now what would happen if we didn't have that second vehicle?
Well, we could make arrangements with the local shuttle service and they'd take you back to your vehicle. What we'll do is after getting our permit here at the Basin Ranger Station, we're going to hike up the Laguna Meadow Trail, which is really nice. It's shaded and has lots of trees. And we should get up to Laguna Meadow early enough in the day that we can drop our gear and make camp and take our day packs and explore the South Rim, which has some just really incredible vistas. And I like it because it's a real different environment for this desert country. And then the morning of day 2, what we'll do is we'll hike down the Blue Creek Canyon Trail with our full packs and hook up with our water cache down here near the Blue Creek Ranch House. This route's really nice too because it gives us the morning of day 3. We can explore the Dotson Trail, which is open and really hot, but we'll have our day packs so we don't have to carry all our water.
You know, how are you carrying your water? My theory was that I was going to bring a bunch of these smaller containers.
Yeah, that'll work. That's exactly what I carried.
Yeah, and that way, if I happen to spring a leak or lose one of them, at least I got some backup.
Yeah, there's nothing sadder than seeing your water trickle off into the dust.
So how big is the park?
A little over 800,000 acres. Actually, it's larger than the state of Rhode Island.
Well, it's nice that it doesn't have the population density of Rhode Island.
No, not right now, but historically it was fairly inhabited. Over 8,000 years ago, the Humano Indians lived here who were displaced by the Chisos Apaches, who ultimately were displaced by the Comanches.
And the Spanish came in there somewhere, didn't they?
Yeah, actually Cabeza de Vaca was shipwrecked on the Texas coast in the 1540s and wandered through here. It was the first Spanish explorer to make his way through the area. And then it was the late 1880s before it was permanently settled by white people.
And what brought them in?
Mercury mining and a little bit of silver and of course the grazing.
I bet that had a big impact on the area, huh?
Oh yeah, you can still see the scars today from their being here.
Is it starting to recover now?
The higher mountains look really good, but the lower desert just may never recover.
Well, we're really coming into some vegetation now.
Yeah, this pine oak ecosystem is really different from where we cached our water today.
Well, what do you figure the altitude is right now?
I'd say about 7,000 feet.
So is this still desert?
Well, not by definition. Actually, a desert is anything with less than 9 inches of rain, whereas up here you get 15 to 24 inches of rain.
You definitely feel it getting cooler too.
Oh yeah, there can be a 10, 15 degree difference between the desert floor and up here.
There must be a big difference between nighttime and daytime too.
Yeah, as much as 40 degrees. It can be 45 degrees at night and as much as 85 in the day.
So getting ready, you're taking one trip, but you've got to think of it as 2 seasons then, huh?
The daytime's like backpacking at summer and nights like winter.
Do you have a favorite time to come out?
Well, I kind of like spring and fall. And summer's just about unbearably hot.
So this is Laguna Meadows?
Yeah, this is where we're going to camp.
Well, then we've just about topped out for the day, right?
Pretty much. We're going to go on up to the South Rim this afternoon, but we've gained about all our elevation.
Well, the grass up here looks like it's in really good shape.
Yeah, it looks good, but it's quite the fragile ecosystem. This area was heavily grazed for a number of years, and it's taken it a good 40 years to come back like this. We need to be really careful about where we walk and stay on the trail and try to minimize our impact.
So how do we know where our campsite is?
It's fairly well marked. In fact, I think ours is just right up here. Nice view of Emery Peak from here, huh?
Yeah. How much higher is that than where we are now?
About 1,000 feet.
Hey, I tell you what, you want to grab some lunch before we head over to the South Rim?
Sure, why don't we set up the fly first?
Now, you like to use a fly instead of a tent. How come?
Well, mostly because of the weight savings. This little fly weighs about 2, maybe 2.5 pounds.
Well, that is a lot of savings when you compare it to a 6 or 7 pound 2-man tent.
Oh yeah, it's another half gallon of water that you could be carrying, and all I really worry about is protection from condensation up here.
You're not worried about snakes, scorpions, anything like that?
No, I've backpacked and lived out here about 19 years, and the only scorpion I've ever been stung by was at my house.
So how is it that a mountain range like the Chizos was plopped right in the middle of a desert like this?
Well, it's not so much that it was plopped down as it pushed up as a result of volcanic activity.
So what you're saying is Emery over here was actually a volcanic intrusion?
That's correct. It's molten lava that cooled underground, and with time the softer rocks wore down around it. In fact, the Chizos Mountains are the only mountain range that are completely contained within a national park.
I heard there was a pretty major fire that came through this canyon about 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Swept right up the canyon and took most of these oaks.
Were you involved in that one?
Not this one, but as a firefighter, I've been in some pretty intense fire line situations. Used to be that fire was perceived as a bad thing, but nowadays it's more of a management tool.
Management tool? What do you mean by that?
Well, in certain places and certain conditions, they'll let fires burn because it's necessary for certain plants to sprout their seeds. I mean, when it's started by lightning, heck, fire is just about as natural as rain.
I'll get the food out of the bear box.
Yeah, it's important to use those bear boxes.
Well, a 1/4-inch plate steel makes it pretty darn bear-proof.
Well, the bears have just come back to the Chizos, and they can be aggressive, and we don't want them to begin to associate people with food.
So we're heading down to Blue Creek Canyon today?
Yeah, we're gonna drop down out of the Chizos and back into the desert and hook up with our water cache. This trail was used for a lot of years by the ranchers down at Blue Creek to bring their cattle up into the high country. It's pretty easy to imagine the cowboys up here.
Oh yeah. Hey, we're still pretty high up. Is it much farther to the desert floor?
Nah, a couple of miles and you'll be amazed at the changes in the terrain.
Phew. Boy, it's plenty hot up here today. What do you think we're going to get down below?
Well, if it's this warm this early up here, it's going to be hot down on the desert floor. Well, we're in it now. This is the desert.
A lot of crushed stone in here. What is this, some kind of an old riverbed?
It's an arroyo, which is Spanish for dry creek bed.
Does any water come through here anymore?
Well, in a wet year it might run 3 or 4 times, but in a dry year like this, it may not run at all. 100 years ago, this arroyo used to run year-round.
Oh, what happened to all the water?
Well, with the coming of white man, they lowered the water table by cutting all the trees and grazing off the grass.
Oh, that sun is really brutal down here.
Yeah, it hits us pretty hard.
Well, it's going to make me glad I've got these clothes on, that's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize how important protective clothing is. They think you can just lather up with sunscreen and be done with it, but I prefer lightweight, long-sleeve cotton shirts myself.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how in any other kind of place, cotton would be the last thing you'd want to have next to your skin because it doesn't offer any insulation value and it takes a long time to dry.
Well, which is exactly the point, because cotton holds the moisture next to your skin, which as it evaporates has a cooling effect.
Yeah, guess you're right. It's funny how even down here, a hat is an essential piece of survival equipment too.
Oh yeah, otherwise you'd fry your brains. I think I'll put my gaiters on now. When you're poking around these little desert trails, sometimes they tend to poke back.
You think I can go with long pants in here?
Well, they're not as good as gaiters, but if you're real careful, they should be okay.
Now, what's the name of this plant?
This is lechuguilla. This is the indicator plant of the Chihuahuan Desert. It's pretty nasty stuff. If it pokes you in the calf, it can stop you dead in your tracks. It has a toxin in the tip.
Ooh, that's not pleasant. Probably shred your boots pretty good too. What kind of boots do you recommend for down in here?
Well, I prefer ones like these all leather ones to the fabric leather type boots because they just get torn up way too fast.
Well, it's really a trick trying to find those trail markers in here, isn't it?
Yeah, they can really blend in. They're little piles of stones among piles of stones. There it is.
Oh, okay. Seems like the trail's pretty well paralleling the arroyo, so why don't we just stay in the arroyo?
Well, it doesn't always work that way. The arroyo doesn't always take you where you want to go. You need to keep an eye out for those cairns so that you don't miss where the trail leaves the wash. You about ready for a break, John?
Oh yeah.
I know a great spot just right up here.
Well, you can really feel that temperature drop.
Oh yeah, it can be 10 or 15 degrees cooler in the shade. It's really important to find a shady spot to rest when you're hiking in the desert, but the shade can be a real hospitable environment for snakes and scorpions, so you need to look around before you sit down.
Good idea. Hey, this looks like a pretty good place to camp.
Well, actually it isn't. These arroyos can flash flood really quickly, and although the sky's blue here, it might be raining up in the Chisos.
It's hard to imagine this place filling up with water.
It can.
You know what they say about the desert? That everything in the desert either sticks, stings, stinks, or bites? Well, I think I found an exception. Look at these butterflies.
I don't know, John. They look pretty aggressive to me.
I don't think anybody's ever been hurt by a butterfly that I know of. You know, I've heard that if you're stuck in a desert without any water, you could just go up to a cactus, cut it open, and drink right out of it. Is that true?
No, actually, that's an old wives' tale. I don't know of any species of cactus that you can get drinking water out of.
There's a lot of variety of cactus around here. Now, what's this one?
This one's a cane cholla.
Well, those look pretty sharp. They stick in you pretty good if you ran into it?
Not as bad as some. They're not barbed on the ends.
Oh, what's this big one over here?
This one's the Tory yucca. It's a lily.
A lily, so it's not even a cactus at all, huh?
No.
You know, it still looks like it could do some damage if you ran into it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what about this other one over here?
That's the sotol.
So tall. It's got some real sharp leaves on this one.
Yeah, it does. It's an interesting plant because the root head is a vegetable, kind of like a potato. And the locals make a real strong liquor out of it called sotol.
Now, what's this one?
This one's the ocotillo. It's not actually a cactus.
Oh, it's kind of pretty, actually.
Yeah, it only gets leaves on it after a rain.
So it must have rained pretty recently then, huh?
Yeah, I'd say a month, maybe 6 weeks ago.
So what do you think the nastiest cactus is that's out here?
Well, myself, I think it's this one right here, the blind prickly pear. Each one of these little red spots is full of real small little hairs like spines, and when you get it in you, it's really hard to get out. I carry a roll of duct tape. It's the easiest way to get them out of you.
Yo, wouldn't want to run into that one.
No, sir.
Well, there it is, our own little desert oasis.
It's like desert gold.
None too soon. I'm down to my last pint of water.
Really? I'm pretty thirsty myself. Oh, here, let me help you with that.
Oh, thanks. Oh, now that's a pretty sight. Hey, what you got cooking?
Red beans and rice. I tend to eat a lot of dehydrated beans when I'm out backpacking.
Oh, but that's good. That's a complete protein and a carbohydrate. How long does it take to cook up?
About 20 minutes. On longer trips, I like to pre-soak it, and that way it cuts the cooking time in half.
Saves you a lot of fuel, too.
Oh, and less time to wait for dinner.
Oh, I like that part. Where'd the Dodson Trail get its name?
Well, old man Dodson used to run a ranch at the base of the Chisos.
Well, this land down here is sure starting to look a lot like the desert I envisioned before coming out here.
Yeah, it's some open country without much shade and pretty exposed.
Yeah, and hot.
Boy, it's that. You know, when I'm hiking down here, I try to start early and knock off by 2 or 3. The reflective heat late in the day is just so harsh, and I really try not to hike more than about a mile an hour.
Well, the nice part of that is that you really get to enjoy the country that you're walking through.
Boy, that's true. Did you know the Spanish used to call this country the Despoblado?
And what's that mean?
It means the uninhabited lands. I've been hiking the Big Bend for almost 20 years now, and I think what it gives me most is a sense of solitude and peace of mind that's really hard to find anywhere else.
Well, I think I found a little bit of it.
Well, I'm glad.
Well, they say to appreciate Big Bend's beauty, you have to appreciate its hostility. And sure, it can seem like an uncomfortable place, an empty country of tortured mountains, dry creek beds, and it's hotter than West Texas chili. But if you can dial into it, you'll find it's a magical land where the rocks glow long after sunset, where space replaces the idea of distance. It's so quiet, you can almost hear the dust settle. It's a hard place to leave, so we'll see you next time on another Trailside. Hey, Rawls, got enough of that water for another day?
Maybe a couple if we're lucky.
All right, so what's the plan?
Well, we still got about 700,000 acres to explore.
Well, the grasses up here look like they're in really good shape.
Yeah, it looks lush, but actually it's quite a fragile ecosystem that's taken a long time to come back. The ranchers were run out when this was made a park in the 40s, and it's just now starting to look good, so we're going to try to minimize our impact and stay on the trail and camp in the designated site.
Well, they say to appreciate Big Bend's beauty, you have to appreciate its hostility. And sure, it can seem like an uncomfortable place, an empty country of tortured mountains, dry creek beds, and it's hotter than West Texas Tilly. Tilly!
Available now. A complete series of Trailside guides from W.W. Norton. These informative books are fully illustrated and filled with color photography. Titles include hiking and backpacking, bicycling, kayaking, cross-country skiing, and winter adventures. To purchase, call 1-800-TRAILSIDE, 1-800-872-4574, $17.95 each plus $3.95 shipping and handling. Trailside is brought to you in part by Chevy Trucks. Next time you're having fun outdoors, remember, you're not alone. And LL Bean, providing sporting gear and apparel for people who love the outdoors for over 80 years. And Weider Nutrition Group, makers of Tiger Sport bars. Nutrition for your body, fuel for your sport.